while we're just getting seated real quick, I just want to point out that Joe Kennedy is actually here. He wrote a great book, and he's out there, and he's telling this great story about his little memoir of an Irish immigrant. So it's a good book. You should go check him out and meet him. He's a great guy. I want to take the time to thank everybody for coming today, and for the next week, weekend of fun. A lot of great things are here, and you'll find out that Cleveland is a medical hub of the world, and we're fortunate enough to have some great people here to talk about healthcare. And I'd like to start off by introducing the moderator today, Brian Griffin, who's the section head at the Cleveland Clinic Cardiovascular Imaging. Dr. Griffin received his medical degree from National University of Ireland in Galway, and completed his internships and residencies in medicine and surgery at the University College Hospital in Galway. And in addition to his training, he completed fellowships in cardiovascular in London, Los Angeles, and Boston. And his clinical interests include valvular heart disease, cardiac imaging, ultrasound imaging through the esophagus. He is board certified in internal medicine with a subspecialty in cardiovascular diseases. And we're very proud to have him here in Cleveland. He's an unbelievable medical professional. I'd like to introduce Brian Griffin. Brian?
Thanks. I hear there's some issues with the microphone, so I hope you can hear me. It's a great pleasure to be here at the Mayo Society's convention. Although I'm not from Mayo myself, I have very strong Mayo links. One of my grandfathers was from Belmullet, and although Belmullet may be a slightly different parish to Achill, where most of the people from in Cleveland are, it's very much Mayo, and I grew up with lots of Mayo people. And my wife, who unfortunately can't be here today, her mother is from Achill, so I'm very tightly bound to Mayo, so it's a great pleasure to be here. I've been in Cleveland for 21 years. I've been at Cleveland Clinic over that time. Cleveland Clinic has gone from being a modest size hospital to being one of the top 3 or 4 hospitals in the country, and probably in the world. And over that time, in cardiovascular disease, we've been #1 in cardiovascular programs by U.S. News and World Report for the last 20 years. So it's Cleveland's been very good to me. It's great to see this interaction between Cleveland and Ireland. I think when I was introduced, probably should have said, what are my interests? They're all things Irish. And we've had a great interaction with Ireland over the years. I have, for many of the years that I've been at the clinic, I was head of the training program in cardiovascular disease. So I've been very fortunate to have had lots of Irish trainees, most of whom have gone back. And so now about a quarter of the cardiologists in Ireland were trained at Cleveland Clinic. Quite a few of the cardiovascular surgeons in Ireland were trained at Cleveland Clinic. And it's fantastic to see how well they've done and how well Ireland has done. I think the other thing that we've been interested in, and Tom can talk to this more than I, and we'll talk about this probably a little bit later, is the interaction between healthcare development in Ireland and with the Cleveland Clinic. We have been involved in going to Ireland quite a few times to lecture, to consult, but also to try and encourage Irish companies, startup companies, to come to Cleveland to do their American business from a Cleveland base. And this is something that we've had a number of success stories in this area. You'll probably hear about that more this afternoon in some of the other forums. But this is something we're interested in doing. Ireland, and particularly the west of Ireland, is sort of a mecca now for a lot of medical device companies, a lot of pharmaceutical companies, and there's, from our perspective, there's a lot of positivity in developing relationships, and this relationship we're developing here is wonderful to have County Mayo be here in Cleveland and be represented so fully here today. So I'm going to stop from what I have to say, and I'm the moderator. We have some great panelists, and I'd like to introduce them. And start with Cynthia. Cynthia has been, she's a last-minute draft because unfortunately Seamus Kavanagh, who is Vice President of Hollister, is from Swinford originally, but his wife was unfortunately taken suddenly ill, and so he can't be here today. But Cynthia has very kindly agreed to stand in here, and Cynthia is Chief Executive of Mayo Roscommon Hospice Foundation in Knock, County Mayo, and she's over 20 years experience of charitable fundraising, management and development. As CEO of Mayo Roscommon Hospice Foundation, working in association with HSE West, she developed the hospice headquarters in Knock, County Mayo, and spearheaded the expansion of the specialist palliative home care service in both Mayo and Roscommon from a 5-day to a 7-day service. She developed the home sitter service to support families caring for a patient at home, and a number of palliative care support rooms or end-of-life care rooms in hospitals and nursing homes in the 2 counties. Cynthia is now looking forward to launching their new capital development project. Negotiations with the HSE and the Department of Health to build 2 new hospice units, 1 in each county, are at an advanced stage. The units will cost €14 million and are to be funded 100% by the foundation. The foundation does not receive state funding and has to raise over $2 million annually through fundraising and donations. So this is a tough job, Cynthia, and Cynthia is obviously very dedicated to developing this comprehensive palliative care service in Mayo and Roscommon, and is delighted that these hospice units will soon be a reality. She's also on the board of the Irish Hospice Foundation, and she was appointed to the board of the Charity Regulatory Authority by the Minister for Justice in April 2014. So welcome, Cynthia, and thanks very much for being here. We're going in alphabetical order here, and Richard Flaherty is Chief Executive Officer of Cancer Care West, which is West of Ireland not-for-profit cancer charity. Cancer Care West provides support to cancer patients and their families from all over the west of Ireland. As CEO, Mr. Flaherty is responsible for the development and expansion of the charity's vital services for cancer patients. These include a 33-bedroom lodge called Nishivan, or Island Paradise, located in Galway, as well as a cancer support centre. The centre also funds research into patient care and national cancer awareness programs. In 2013, Cancer Care West provided support to over 1,600 people from all over the west of Ireland. Services are provided at no cost to patients and their families, relying heavily on charitable funding and donations. And lastly, we're very honoured to have Tom Graham here. Tom is a very good friend of mine, very good friend of Ireland. He has been Chief of Cleveland Clinic Innovations, and he is recognized by his patients and his peers and by everybody as one of the leading orthopedic surgeons in the world, and a prolific inventor. He is Mr. Hand Surgeon, so if you have anything wrong with your hand, Tom is the guy to see. And he has consulted with sports people. Everybody has actually consulted on Irish sports people, I know. And he received his MD from the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine, then completed a fellowship at Indiana Hand Center. And see, heart is very close to me. So,
Promotion.
and extended his training as a visiting surgeon at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. Additionally, Dr. Graham received a degree in Executive Management and Healthcare Administration through the Weatherhead School of Management at Case Western Reserve University. He holds a number of awards, including Woodward and White's Best Doctors in America, and is on the Who's Who in America, and has authored well over 100 publications related to hand surgery. Tom is also, as I said, head of innovations. He can talk to what it takes to take something from an idea from the bedside. How do you get that through to getting it into development so that eventually is a product? And he has done that for us. We have a huge number of innovations that come through Cleveland Clinic. One of our challenges is to funnel those so that they receive appropriate support, and Tom has been a magnificent leader in that area. And as I've said, we have worked with various companies in Ireland as part of that development and to encourage the bilateral work on medical innovation. So I'm going to open it up to the various individuals. We had actually been told that this is going to be kind of just a panel discussion, but Richard very nicely brought some slides, and I think that would be great because it will break things up a little bit for us. And as we're going in alphabetical order, I think I'm going to start with Cynthia and maybe just say a few words about where you are in healthcare and what the challenges you face and where you see the next maybe 5 years, what you need to achieve for the people you really care about, which are an incredibly important group of people. Hospice is growing everywhere. Having personally been involved with family members who needed it in Ireland and here in the US, it's only when the time arrives that you realize how critical this is and how we don't always think about it enough. And I know in Ireland one of the challenges is to have enough beds and to have to make sure that people have access. And so Cynthia, with that, tell us how things are.
Thank you, Brian. Can you hear me? I don't need to hold this microphone. Can you hear?
I can hear you.
You're okay. Well, I suppose I'd like to tell you a story about a lovely gentleman whom I met in Ballycastle some years ago. I'm sure some of you will be familiar with Ballycastle. But I was invited out to meet with the local hospice support group, and they had done lots of fundraising for us, and they were presenting me with a fine substantial cheque for our service. So we had the photograph taken for the Western people, and afterwards I thanked them and said how much we appreciated all their hard work and how important the funds were to us, and I explained where we were at in the service and what our plans were for the future in developing inpatient units or our hospices. So the evening went really well, and afterwards we all sat and had a lovely cup of tea and some homemade scones, and just a little later in the evening this fine, tall, elderly gentleman walked up to me and he extended his hand and shook hands, and I can remember his hands were like shovels, and he said, "You're doing great work, Agro." I can remember when I was a young man, on a still night, you could hear the cries coming from a house in the valley where somebody, some poor soul, was trying to die. He said, "I'll take that sound with me to the grave." He said, "Just keep up the good work, Agro." My mother couldn't actually say the word cancer. She would bless herself and say, "that awful pain." And the experience of that generation was that they were absolutely terrified of dying in pain. And that is the reason why our foundation came into being. Our patron is a man called Dr. Bert Farrell, and he was a GP at the time in Westport, and he was seeing his patients being sent home from hospital to die with absolutely no service or to support them. So he got together with a small group of people, and with the support of the local Lions clubs, our foundation was established in 1992. The Lions clubs raised an initial £100,000 at the time, just to get the service off the ground. So from very humble beginnings, where we just had one hospice nurse in Roscommon, 2 in Mayo, and a medical director, we have now got the best home care service in Ireland, and that is a fact. We have more specialist palliative care nurses on the ground in Mayo and Roscommon than any other service in Ireland. We are consultant-led, we are accredited, we have social workers, family therapists, hospice support workers who go out to support families in the home by giving people an opportunity to have a good night's sleep, or to let the main carer go out and do a bit of shopping, or for the woman in the house to get her hair done. Just really practical. We developed our hospice support beds in hospitals and nursing homes throughout Mayo and Roscommon, and we continually fund the upskilling of our teams. Our nurses have done nurse prescribing courses, our social workers, multiple bereavement work courses. One of our social workers is currently doing a course where she will work with children through play therapy. Last year, we had, in the 2 counties, 809 patients looked after. And if you consider for every one patient, like putting a pebble in a stream, there's a minimum of at least 10 people impacted. In Mayo alone, there were 527. The age profile ranges from 0 to 90 plus. We would have babies sent home to die with Edwards syndrome. Last week, we lost a little 6-year-old. And the youngest patient on our books currently is a wee 18-year-old lad. The patients range, it's predominantly cancer patients, but our teams also look after patients with end-stage motor neuron, muscular dystrophy, COPD, heart failure and dementia. And we, as I say, we have the best home care service in Ireland, and we now need to move to the next level. And last Thursday was a momentous day for our foundation. Our Taoiseach, Enda Kenny, announced on local radio that we had the go-ahead to build our Mayo Hospice. This is the culmination of a dream. It's something we have been working towards for years and years, and it is just, it's so exciting. It's absolutely wonderful. We're now going to build a specialist inpatient facility with daycare services, a base for our home care team, and accommodation for families. And that is phase 1 of our capital development programme. Phase 2 is to build a similar unit in Roscommon. And the 2 units, as you've said, Ryan, are going to cost us, that costing was actually done back in 2011. We're in the region of around 15 million to build those 2 hospice units. But the good news is we have raised over 60% of that already, and the banks have agreed to lend us the balance. The difficult bit is that we have to lift our income from where it's currently at about 1.3, that's our input into the service currently is about 1.3 million. We have to lift it to over 2 million. And we have a very small pool to draw from. The population of Mayo is about 130,000 and Roscommon is about 64,000. So we have a big job on our hands. But we know with the support of the people we can do it. If I can just tell you a wee story. Our office, as Brian says, it's in Knock. And we would have people coming into us every day, families who've been cared for, and they'd come in to make a donation or to tell us about a fundraising event that they're organising. And one particular day, this lovely wee lady came into me, and her husband John had been looked after. And John had had to spend a very long time in hospital, and he absolutely hated it. No reflection on hospitals, but every time she went in, he would say, please, please take me home. He desperately wanted to go home to see his cattle and to be with his old dog, Toby. And it broke Margaret's heart that she had to go and leave him. And she could see that he was actually fading away before her eyes. Then eventually John was actually referred to palliative care, and we got him home. And within days, he rallied. He got his appetite back, he got his walk back. And Margaret told me that whenever our nurses came in, his face would absolutely light up. He knew their names, and they worked with him to keep him as well as he could be. And one of our hospice workers, Dennis, he's a really, really lovely guy, he would take John out to see the cattle, and accompanied by the old dog, Toby. And John used to say the dog was as banjaxed as himself, his hips were gone, and his eyesight was nearly gone. But John had almost 6 weeks at home with Margaret, and the family were coming and going, and the neighbours were able to come in and say goodbye. And Margaret said to me, you know, they had been married for 47 years and never a crossword between them. And she was so grateful that our service enabled her to be able to honour his wish to be at home. Now sadly, not every patient can be cared for at home, and an awful lot of patients, their symptoms are much too complex, and they need to have specialist inpatient facilities so that they can be cared for in an appropriate setting. And far too many times we have seen our Mayo patients in busy acute hospitals where staff are absolutely run off their feet, and the facilities are certainly far from appropriate. We've seen young mums and young dads in multi-bedded wards with just a curtain pulled around them for no privacy and no dignity. And we have got to put an end to that. We've had patients from Achill, patients from Lewisburg, Belmullet, and one lovely young dad from Bunnyconlon. He told me that he often used to have to pull in on the side of the road and close his eyes for 10, 15 minutes, and then get up and kind of walk around the car before he could actually continue the journey home. He was so exhausted, particularly where there's young people, their hearts are strong, they survive, they want to survive. Moms want to be there for maybe their child is making first communion and they want to live and last and be there for them when there's a birthday or it's Christmas. So some of these experiences for the families can be so protracted and it is absolutely exhausting. So we want to put an end to that. And our hospice will be a flagship development. It will be a place where when patients need that inpatient facility, we'll be able to wrap them in a blanket of warm care where they can have appropriate services. And that's what our next step is. And Wednesday, our Taoiseach made the announcement on National Coffee Morning at Home, which was the Thursday. And on Wednesday night before it, he rang me and he said, "You must be a happy woman." And I said, "Yes, Taoiseach, I'm very, very happy and I'm very much looking forward to your announcement tomorrow." He said, "Tell me where are you at with the planning?" So I explained that we just have to get the HSE to sign off on the final plans and within a couple of weeks we'll be ready. Yes, we'll be celebrating when the Saints come marching in. But we'll be able to go for planning, we will build our hospice, we'll move our home care team in, we'll open daycare services, and then in 2017 the funding from the state will come on stream to open our beds. There'll be an extra 3.1 odd million coming into Mayo to actually staff the funding of our units. So that is our goal, that is the legacy that we want to leave for the people of Mayo. And I'm delighted to be here and to have an opportunity to speak with you. I have our information leaflets with us, they're out there. I've actually got some drawings. I didn't bring slides and things, I'm no good with gadgets. But I have the drawings of our units with me if anybody would like to see them. And if anybody has any questions or any information that they'd like to know, please come and ask me afterwards. I'd be more than happy to talk with you. Just thank you for listening. Thank you to Mayo County Council. We are their chosen charity last year and again this year, and they've been so generous to us. And Joe Kennedy, as he was mentioned earlier, Joe has been supporting us for years, and he's doing it again through his book On the Strength of a 10-Bob Note, and they're out there in God's sake at the moment. Thank you for listening. Good health to you all. Gorum mil mahabir for now.
So, Richard, I think we'll have you show some slides.
Yeah.
Great, thanks very much.
My name is Richard Farrell, I'm the Chief Executive of Cancer Care West, and I'm delighted to be here this morning to talk about Cancer Care West, the service we provide to cancer patients in the west of Ireland, and particularly to cancer patients from Mayo. Just our mission, we're dedicated to providing support to cancer patients and their family from all over the west of Ireland. What do we do? Our aims, we try to improve the lives affected by anyone through a cancer diagnosis to be residential property called Inisheven, which I'll talk about later. We also provide psychological and support services. We also recently started providing support to cancer patients' families who have to stay in Galway for long periods of time while a family member or friend is getting treatment in the hospital. A typical case would be a leukemia patient, where leukemia unfortunately can mean a long-term stay in Galway University Hospital, and the family want to be down there with their son or daughter, and that can be quite expensive, about weeks or months of accommodation. And since 2013 we've come in and provided support in accommodation terms to families. And last year we supported 17 families, and we hope to grow that into the future. We also promote research into patient care. We recently partnered with the University Foundation in Galway to create a fund of €1 million to provide 10 PhDs in 10 areas of cancer research. Our primary focus though is patient care. The region we cover is all the way from Donegal down to North Clare, and obviously Mayo is an important part of that area. It's a wide geographical area in terms of Galway, poorly supported by infrastructure around transport to get down to Galway. One big impact for cancer patients, particularly in Mayo, was the centralisation of cancer services to Galway University Hospital. This happened in 2007, which really meant that cancer patients from Mayo receiving treatment, radiotherapy or leukemia would have to travel to Galway for their treatment. This was brought into the centralisation system with Professor Tom Keane from Canada adopted the Canadian model. It was best practice. The outcomes for the patients are better, having all the cancer services in one hospital in the West, but it places huge logistical problems for people from Mayo and Donegal and Sligo to travel down to Galway. With that, in 2007, we built and opened in Sullivan on the grounds of the hospital at a cost of 4.25 million, funded solely by the charity. It's a 33-bedroom lodge that provides accommodation to cancer patients undergoing radiotherapy. Now, radiotherapy is a 6 to 8 weeks treatment. You get one treatment a day, so you're there for the duration of almost 2 months. You can imagine from cancer patients from Mayo, that means a 2 months stay in Galway. So they can stay with us on the grounds, they can walk to the hospital. We have fully trained oncology nurses and staff that can help the patients while they stay with us. You can see the inside of there. We have breakfast and evening meals. We provide a breakfast and evening meal 5 days a week to all our patients. And we have twin rooms. And when we built in Sullivan, we were very conscious that, for instance, a patient from Benamullet who received a diagnosis for prostate cancer, he may never have left the county of Mayo in his life, and he had to come to Galway for two months at a time. So we made sure that his wife, or family member, or friend could stay with him for the duration of his treatment. So all our rooms are twin rooms, and we generally find that they come down for the first week, but they get on so well and they meet the staff and other people that the person can actually, family friend can go home, and the person that's staying with us is fine. And that's just a general layout of the place. We have a garden at the back. Everything is kind of in a 4-star hotel kind of scenario. And we have a library, a canteen that people come in and out of. We say to people, treat the lodge as a home from home. So bring people in, bring friends in. We have our own car parking space, which car parking in any hospital is a nightmare, particularly in Galway. The important facet of this, we provide entertainment to the patients, because it can be quite a long day for them. And it's a great way for the patients to mix and meet people who are going through a common cancer journey. And we find that, you know, the mutual support that cancer patients get when they're going through a similar cancer diagnosis is hugely important to people. So they make friends, they help each other out when they're going through a tough time in their treatment, and that's a very important part of what we do. And I'm often asked, what would happen if Sullivan didn't exist? And if Sullivan didn't exist, if someone from Mayo, for instance, that was coming through for radiotherapy would have to travel every day up and down for 8 weeks, which, you know, really is not the best outcome for any patient. They'd have to stay in accommodation close to the hospital, which is, number one, very expensive and very difficult to get. Or some patients are too sick actually to take a place in a B&B or a hotel. They would take up an acute bed in the hospital. And when I'm talking about Sullivan, I always like to talk about Mayo, because since we opened in 2007, consistently 1/3 of the people who come through our doors are from Mayo. Less than 5% are from Galway, for instance. So since we've opened, we've had over 800 people from Mayo stay with us for 6 to 8 weeks. A family member or friend can stay with them. And we're consistently full in Sullivan. Unfortunately, cancer is not going away. The numbers that are coming in the west of Ireland, the biggest incidence of prostate cancer in the world is in the west of Ireland. We don't know the reason why that is, but it is. So there's huge demands put on our service. There's a waiting list to get into Sullivan, but we try to accommodate as many people as we can. We also, in 2009, opened our Cancer Support Centre, which really was a response to worldwide research that said 40% of people who get a cancer diagnosis suffer psychologically from the effects of that. The kind of services we provide in the centre is advice, information, group therapies, one-on-one counselling, and a variety of complementary therapies. That's just an illustration of how the building looks. It's a very non-clinical, welcoming building. It's based on the Maggie Centre in Scotland, which were built around this person called Maggie, who got a very bad cancer diagnosis and came out of her consultant's office and was shell-shocked, had nowhere to go, no one to speak to. And her husband said, "We've got to do something about this." So he was a very well-known architect, and he built these very distinctive cancer support centres on the grounds of the hospital. So someone who was going through, or a family member was going through a cancer diagnosis, could come in and talk to someone and get help. Because we're all about, the treatments are getting better in cancer. People are surviving, but some people find it very difficult to get over the diagnosis. It stays with them psychologically very difficult to get back and living the life they did before it. So this centre is really about helping people to cope. We've had over 400 people from Mayo use the centre since we opened in 2009. And obviously, people in Sullivan can use that centre anytime. And that's just inside of the centre. And that lady's carrying out reflexology is one of our complementary therapies. It's very good for people who are having difficulty sleeping or relaxing, which is often the case of patients we have. We don't charge for any of our services. They're all free of charge. It costs $1.5 million for us currently to maintain our existing services. We received $500,000 from the HSE. When we started up in Sullivan, we got a recommendation that we would get all our operating costs met, which was over $1 million. We've had a 60% cut since 2007. So really, it's putting a bigger burden back on us around fundraising. We need to raise $1 million a year just to keep going. There's a new radiotherapy centre we planned for the hospital in Galway, which is going to increase the capacity by 66%. That's going to open in 2017. So we know that we need to expand as well to meet that need. And I always think, I'm talking about any achievement, I'm talking about what we do, but I always find our best stories, like Cynthia, are people who've used our services to come back and tell us what it means to them. And they write cards to us after leaving and tell us what the experience was like. But one line always sticks out to me about Sullivan. And it's, when I think back to Sullivan, I remember it not as the place where I was when I was sick, but the place where I began to get well. And that's really what we're all about. We're a West of Ireland charity. West of Ireland, sometimes we feel that we get the last bit of help out there. We've got to help ourselves. And they did adopt the policy of moving all the services to Galway University Hospital, which is probably best practice and better outcomes, but they didn't think of the effect it would have to people to travel down to have to go through that treatment. And we really, identified this and met it, but we need to grow our services again because this is just, the numbers are going to increase in the next 20 years. It's going to double. So really, there are contact details. I have literature on what we do as well. I really like to thank you and thank the organisers for giving me the chance to talk about our work. And I'm available to talk to anyone after the talk to answer any questions. And thanks very much for your attention.
Well, that was terrific, Richard. This is obviously these are areas that are common to everywhere, and one of the things that we find in Cleveland, obviously, is we're a beacon for people who have severe illness from all over the world, not just from Ohio, but from people from all over the world. It is probably the most difficult thing for patients and their families is to be so far away from family and support when you probably need them most. And there are charities here in Northeast Ohio which have been wonderful. Thinking of the Ronald McDonald House for kids, but there are great cancer charities, as you know. And there is a need that is everywhere. And maybe it's one of the things we might talk about is, we are moving to a situation in treatment where the most sophisticated treatment is not available. It's only available in certain centers, or if you really want to be good at it, you need to do a lot of it. And in some ways that's been the focus of our success in Cleveland. On the other hand, how do you make sure that as much of that treatment goes back to the community? And obviously the place where that's most appropriate is at either end of life, at the beginning of life and at the end of life. And so our ability not only to have hospices but to provide care at home for people who are dying is, probably is a marker of the quality of our community and of who we are. So I think it's something that we all feel very strongly about. I would say that one of the leaders in the palliative care movement in the United States and throughout the world is was here in Cleveland Clinic, and we have, you know, a wonderful palliative care group here. And Declan Walsh, who's originally from Dublin and has gone back to Ireland as I think as at Trinity now, has retired from Cleveland Clinic, where he was sort of the leader, one of the leaders in palliative care. Declan is a good friend and has done fantastic work in this area. But let's go on and talk to Tom Graham. Tom, I think Tom has a unique experience, and he's a wonderful surgeon. He's a very caring doctor. He's been very involved in new treatments and new ways to do things, and he's certainly been involved in encouraging other people to do that. And he's also been a patient, and I think, I mean, we've all been patients, but Tom's story is probably one of the most dramatic that I've dealt with or I've been involved in. We've been good friends. I think it's actually your real story of that started about 2 years ago at the Mayo, dinner for the Taoiseach.
Literally, it left the company of the Taoiseach.
And so maybe Tom, you want to give us your
Sure.
multiple
My
perspectives.
voice is not as strong as my colleagues, but what inspiring stories, Cynthia and Richard. Really appreciate you sharing those. I'm certainly humbled as a son of Scotland to be welcome here on the occasion of the Ryder Cup.
Scottish aren't doing that well.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I have an interesting nexus of my experiences. I dedicated my life to the practice of hand surgery. It's all I ever wanted to be since I was a very young lad. I then took an interest in the development of new technologies and businesses as an entrepreneur. But I'm the beneficiary of a highly evolved innovation ecosystem. I spent essentially 6 months in the hospital in 2012-13. Very unusual medical condition that almost claimed my life. Certainly not expected to survive. And so through caring and also expertise, I was able not only to survive, but I am now back essentially to life as normal. So it was a really interesting perspective to have dedicated decades to the pursuit of helping others and then be the individual who required that. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the importance of the personal spirit, the family, the healing environment. What I do now is to translate the creative and transcendent thought of caregivers to a place where it can be returned, usually through the marketplace, to the same individuals in order to improve and extend human life. Medicine has a highly personal element. It can't be denied, and it was so eloquently described by my colleagues. Typically, there's also a technical component to it. And we need advances in our techniques and technology in order to push the envelope. How many people have been saved by penicillin? I mean, we can be, but then we now have the artificial heart. And every day you pick up a publication or hear on the news about an advancement in the care of cancer or heart disease or diabetes. These come from bright minds who are typically toiling right at the bedside and recognize the unmet need, or at the laboratory bench side and have dedicated their intellectual capacity to solving the most pressing problems. You know, worldwide, we're at an inflection point in medical care delivery. And there is no region, no institution, practically no individual that will not be touched by this. Nobody's immune to the importance. The wealth of the nation is its health. That can be translated right down to the family, the health of the family. And so having capabilities to recognize innovative ideas and to gestate them so they receive the support and resource they need to then make it to the hands of our skilled individuals to help people is really one of the most important things to which I feel I could have dedicated my life. Innovation to us, as we use that term with frequency, is simply putting the transcendent thought to practice. It's a discipline. It is not an ethereal, what we have good ideas or we feel we're creative. It is literally reducing to practice those concepts that we believe can help people. Our institution, the Cleveland Clinic, has had 9-decade plus history of bringing forth developments like blood transfusion, kidney transplant, coronary angiography and open heart surgery. So we were a perfect cauldron in which to develop these concepts of creating an infrastructure to make sure that the ideas were not simply shoved in a drawer, but had the mechanism to move toward development so they could help people. In the mid-90s, frankly, I didn't have enough personal resource to advance my own patent portfolio. And I went to the leadership of our institution at that time and asked how this was handled. And of course the answer was, how do you want to handle it? And we found that partnering the individual with the institution over intellectual property was an important step. It's very expensive, and you need expertise, legal expertise, engineering, prototyping, regulatory expertise. You know, innovation happens at the intersection of knowledge domains. I like to say that the greatest advancements in music, poetry, philosophy, of course science, and my science, medicine, happen in the port cities, because that's where ideas had intercourse. And that's what you need. You need a thriving environment where creative and dedicated individuals can share their experiences. Some may have locks, others keys, but you have to put them together. And you mentioned our relationships in Ireland. Not only was I so proud to visit many, many times, speak at the Royal College where I met my patient Gordon Darcy. He came to see us. I do get the honor of taking care of athletes from all over the world. But we forged relationships with Enterprise Ireland, the university system, the newly evolving I-360 Med Ireland, that unites a lot of the creative intellectual resources of the country. We believe that these models of collaboration will be how we advance the concepts more rapidly, more economically, and more effectively. There's other benefits. I was the recipient of the benefits on a very personal level, but even on a community level, there's probably nothing more patriotic than to pursue the concepts that we now see. And let's take Cleveland, and I imagine this description will be just as descriptive of places with which you're familiar. Ohio is an agrarian economy for centuries. We then became an industrial giant. We made things here. There are changes in the United States economy. We no longer have those jobs. Yet we become a knowledge-based economy. Healthcare is at the very centroid of that. We can leverage our experience, our creativity, and dedication in a whole new way. And the result, again, is not only helping individual human beings, but it's growing jobs and growing the economy. I don't want to lose sight. Everything we do, when I'm wearing a scrub suit, it is very facile to understand I'm helping an individual by doing an operation on their hand. When I'm wearing a business suit, I feel that there is no less dedication to improving and extending human life. And I also embrace the concept of economic development. We create jobs. And I think both of those together are very worthwhile pursuits. And I see them absolutely aligned with the work that you're doing. And I like how the progression went from care right on the front line. You mentioned the importance of research. Research with development. Having those ideas bring the new concepts and the new tools for us to help and put them in your hands with the heart, my hands, I think are vital. And so again, I'm very honored to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thanks very much, Tom. You know, one of the things, I might turn to you, Tom, first, is, you know, we've tended to look at innovations in a very limited way, in that you think of, you know, new tools or new ways of new devices to help with health. But let's, you know, take Cynthia's world, which is in hospice, where, you know, these are in many ways the most needy patients. We can certainly manage their care, but it often requires tremendous intensivity of treatment, and we haven't probably looked to trying to innovate in how we might provide that care so they can maybe have it at home rather than having to be in, you know, a hospice environment. And maybe you could talk to that, you know, those areas that aren't sort of high tech, but which are still very at the core of what we do.
Sure. Let me give a discussion in generality than specificity. If you looked at the portfolio of our intellectual property holdings, they indeed are in medical device, pharmaceuticals, molecules, drugs. We have seen an amazing explosion of the interest and capabilities in healthcare information technologies, and then what I call delivery systems. And sometimes those latter two are linked. I don't think there's any doubt that from an expense side to the system, to a facility side, to the family, and to the impact side of the individual, care at home is becoming more and more important. We've moved from care being rendered almost exclusively at academic nuclei, like the University Hospital Galway or the Cleveland Clinic. We've moved that to other centers. You've described some. It's moving toward the home. And what I really like is not only the processes, those are advancements and innovations, but to then enable them, maybe through technology. The concept of distance health, rendering care, whether it's through a video link, whether it's through some type of wearable technology. I have on my wrist something that tracks my steps, and I can put in information about my diet. How about if we put all that together? I don't think high tech has to be low touch. I think you can combine them, because there's information that probably can be gleaned from a distance by seeing the patient through a video link, by having information transferred about their weight or their heart rate, or possibly some even more sophisticated things like metabolic readings through things we're advancing right now. We're in a relationship with our Air Force about literally using perspiration as an indicator of multiple metabolic processes. By putting those together, we can keep people at home or in a hospice environment instead of continually bringing them back to the sterile, if you will, environment of the hospital. So I see the intersection as very strong and very important. So,
Cynthia, maybe you would like to say how does that fit into your world? You have you're at the front line. You have people who have lots of needs. Many have pain issues or have issues with even nutrition issues. And then there's the fundamental dignity issue. How do you ensure that people at the end of life have their dignity when they can't really care for themselves?
It's a huge, but I mean, there's no doubt about it. What you're doing is incredibly important to what we're doing, because all of the advances in new medicines and new ways of administering medicine are so important. Basically, down to the little syringe driver, where a medication can be administered rather than orally, so that it can go in and be fed through on a 24/7 basis. That has made such a huge difference, because if somebody is incredibly ill and nauseous, you know, you cannot administer medication orally. So having this little gadget, which is only a small little thing like a bicycle repair tube, little kit, that will actually, the medics can prescribe and they can determine what drugs need to go into that little machine. And that can give people so much comfort. And we now, I don't know how it is here, but at home, our home care teams, our palliative home care teams, put up syringe drivers as a matter of course in the home. So, and they can monitor and manage very difficult cases. But obviously, as I said earlier, that's not always possible. Symptoms can be incredibly complex, and they need to be able to come into the hospice unit for a period to get their condition under control, and then they can move back home again. But having the research, having the knowledge, all of what you're doing is so, so important to improve the quality of life for the people that we're actually looking after. So my son is actually an engineer. He's in biomedical as well, and he was with Abbott. He's now out in Australia. But I remember the excitement when he was working with the stents that they use, and he was trying to describe this gadget and titanium and all the things that go up. Oh, I won't even try to describe it, because I just stood there and nodded and said, yes, that's wonderful, you're doing great work. But it's so important, having all of the people with the skills and the ability to actually produce the pieces of equipment that are required and to have the drugs that are needed. It's hand in hand, we're all on the same path.
That's fantastic that he obviously was enthusiastic because he knew he was helping people.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a detachment.
Oh.
He was just as important in the whole ecosystem of helping people as the individual at the bedside.